Okay, today's video is about forming ions. So we should write this on here somewhere. Okay, an ion is formed when an atom gains or loses an electron, or one or more electrons, so that it has either a positive or negative charge. So let's talk about how this happens. If you remember, we drew Bohr models of atoms in our last lesson. And when we drew Bohr models, what we did was we looked at the atom, and we've got two examples here. We've got sodium and fluorine. So first we're going to look at fluorine. And if you look at fluorine on the periodic table, it's element number 9. And that tells us that it's got, and this is fluorine 19. Okay, so it's got 9 protons, 10 neutrons, and 9 electrons. Okay, so if we draw the Bohr model for this atom, we draw the nucleus with the protons and neutrons in the nucleus. And then we're going to draw the electrons. Remember, 2 electrons in the first energy level, and that leaves us with 7 electrons in the second energy level. Okay, remember that these 7 electrons in the outermost energy level have a special name. These are called the valence electrons. Okay, now, when these ions form, what we have to remember is that atoms are most stable, elements are most stable when they have 8 electrons in their valence or outer shell. Okay, so they are going to want to gain or lose electrons in order to get 8 electrons in their outer shell. Okay, so what we have to look at is, are they going to gain electrons or are they going to lose electrons? Okay, and we have to think about what's going to be easiest, because atoms are always going to take the easiest way to get to 8. Okay, so let's look at fluorine for an example. Okay, in its valence shell, it has 7 electrons, so it's got 7 valence electrons. Okay, to be in its most stable form, it would need 8. So it's got 2 choices. It could either lose 7 electrons, or it could gain 1 electron. Okay, so of these 2 options, it's going to be much easier for it to gain 1 electron, okay, than to give away 7. So what's going to happen to fluorine is it is going to gain an electron. So now, instead of having 7 electrons in its valence shell, it's going to pick up an extra electron from some other atom, and we'll talk about that in another unit. And now, it's going to have 8 electrons in its valence shell, giving it its most stable electron configuration, its most stable outer shell. Now look at what we've done. We've added an electron, so now we've still got 9 protons, 10 neutrons, but down here we now have 10 electrons. So what's happened is our charge, our balance of charge has changed. Okay, so this is something we've got to think about. We've got plus 9 but we've got 10 electrons, so we've got minus 10 for an overall -1 charge. So our fluorine ion, it's no longer called an atom, it's called an ion, has an overall -1 charge because it's got an extra electron. So when we write that, we write it as F, the symbol for fluorine, -1, because now it's an ion, okay? Let's look at another example, okay? Here we have sodium. If we look at our periodic table, sodium, we have sodium 23, okay? Element number 11 on the periodic table, so 11 protons, 12 neutrons. We have 3 energy levels. So we've got 2 electrons in the first energy level, 8 electrons in the second energy level, which leaves us 1 electron in the third energy level. Okay, so again, sodium wants to have that stable outer shell, electron shell. It wants to have 8 electrons in its outermost shell. So there's 2 options for sodium. It can either, it's only got 1 here, so it can either gain 7 electrons or lose 1 electron. Okay, so which of these options is going to be the easiest? To find 7 electrons to gain from other atoms, or to just give 1 away? It's going to take the easiest path, so it's not going to gain 7, it's going to lose 1. And when it does that, it loses that outermost electron. And when it does that, what happens is it actually loses that whole third energy level. And now, if we look, now it's the outermost energy level is the second energy level for sodium, and it's got 8 electrons in it, okay? We need to look at our protons, neutrons, and electrons for sodium and just count them up and see what's happened to our charge. So if we think about it, we've got 11 protons, 12 neutrons. How many electrons do we have? Now we have 10 electrons, okay? Let's add up the charge. So we've got 11 protons, so that's plus 11. 10 electrons, each one of those is -1, so -10. If we add those together, we end up with +1. So our sodium ion, because this is now an ion because it's gained or lost an electron, it's got a charge. So our sodium ion is Na, okay, that's the symbol for sodium. I'm going to abbreviate it, +1. Okay, so this is how atoms gain and lose electrons to form ions. We're going to practice this in class. So I hope this helps to explain how ions are formed.